If you've stopped working out and you're feeling disappointed with regressing and losing your gains, remember this. The next time you get back into training, you're going to get your muscles back way faster the second time. It's called skeletal muscle memory. Now, there are different opinions as to how muscle memory works, but there's an emerging theory that might be the most accurate of them all, and it has to do with epigenetics. Epigenetics might be the secret to growing your muscles back faster the second time. But to understand the epigenetic theory, we need a quick review of the other theories. Now, I've got a couple other videos explaining these in more depth, so check those out if you want more detail. But this is the overview. Your muscles are made up of a bunch of muscle fibers. Now, these things are actually the key to your muscle growth. This thing is a nucleus, and this is the thing that remembers how to grow your muscles. Now, what's special about these muscle fiber cells is that they actually have many nuclei, plural, within them. The myonuclei are actually considered the brains of a muscle fiber. Now, each myonuclei contains within it a copy of your DNA. Now, these myonuclei will actually pull information from your DNA, and they'll produce what we call mRNA. Now, you could consider these instructions. Now, these instructions leave the myonuclei and float through the cell. And then specialized machinery can actually read these instructions to produce what we call proteins. Proteins are so important. They do basically everything. Proteins are like the machinery at a construction site. You could call them molecular machinery. So that thing that originally read your instructions, that's also a protein. It shows that proteins do literally everything in your body. Now, as you get bigger, as you grow your muscle, the fiber size increases. But as it grows, the territory that your myonuclei need to serve also grows. You only have so many myonuclei in your muscle fiber, right? As that volume increases, it's gonna get harder for your myonuclei to serve all of that area. So how do they handle this increase in demand? A growing muscle fiber will actually get more myonuclei. It looks like the myonuclei are actually being donated from the outside of the muscle fiber. But the big question is, what happens when your muscle atrophies? Like when it shrinks after maybe not training for a while? Well, you have a bunch of myonuclei that had been added because your muscle had gotten big, right? Well, if the volume shrinks, do those myonuclei stick around? Or are they not needed anymore? Do they degrade? Some scientists propose that in fact, the number of myonuclei stayed the same during muscle atrophy, during that territory shrinkage. So could more myonuclei remaining in your atrophied muscle help you build back your muscle faster the second time you get serious about your training? Well, many scientists say yes, that this is the secret to muscle memory. A lot of videos that you can find on this subject conclude this, that your muscle memory is coming from retaining the myonuclei from your prior training. But other scientists are coming out now saying that this might actually be wrong.
While we had generally thought a few years ago, and in fact, you can find me on podcasts and probably in some of my videos talking about this, and I'm going to tell you right now, those things are wrong. Like we've just had new things come out these last couple of years. In fact, it's actually probably what's happening is it's a epigenetic change in the nuclei's ability to access the DNA needed to grow muscle.
Your epigenetics could be contributing pretty heavily to your muscle growth or atrophy. Basically, epigenetics can increase or decrease the number of instructions coming out from an individual myonuclei. So how do epigenetics contribute to our muscle memory? Somehow, we're seeing that it can increase or decrease the number of instructions coming from a myonuclei. So first of all, how does that work? And second of all, how does it have a memory? How can it remember our previous training and somehow kick into gear right away to produce more instructions the second time we get into our training? So what is epigenetics? Well, epi translates to above. So epigenetics literally means above the genome. And this is actually a pretty appropriate word because in epigenetics, what happens is that you have your gene and your DNA, and something will actually land on top of that gene. Usually it's a methyl group. We'll talk about that in a second. So something literally lands on top and it covers your gene. It keeps it from being read. So it's, in a way, it's actually turning on or off your genes. This is a big deal because if you don't have a gene available to be read, you cannot produce the protein that that gene codes for. Now you might be wondering about reading the gene. What is reading this gene? Well, it's proteins, of course, because proteins do just about everything. A protein will actually sit on top of your gene and it will run along it and actually read it. And then from reading, it'll actually create the instructions that then come out of your myonuclei. So that's the connection there. You have your gene, you have a protein that sits on top. As it runs along the gene, it's spitting out the instructions. The instructions then leave the myonuclei, go out into the cell, into the cytoplasm it's called, and then other proteins can grab onto that information, those instructions, and then they'll read those instructions. And if you remember, what do they produce? They produce a protein. As they read those instructions, they're spitting out a protein. That's the overall structure of going from your DNA all the way to a protein. Now, if your gene is instead covered, it's hidden from view, so to speak, then no protein can come in to read that DNA. Now, there's many ways to actually cover the gene. It could be from what I said before, that methyl group landing on top and covering it. Or it could be from how the DNA is wound up. Your DNA is long and there's so much to it. It's like spaghetti and it just flies all over the place. So you have to wind it up to keep it consolidated. So if it's wound up, then it kind of gets covered and hidden, and it's basically not exposed, right? So no protein can actually come in to read it. But in this video, we're mostly going to be talking about one major way of covering, which is that methyl group landing on top. Now, when you cover or uncover a gene, that's where memories can actually be encoded on a molecular level. What I mean by that is that your body can actually say, I don't really need this gene anymore. The protein that this gene codes for is no longer useful for me, at least in this moment in time. So I'm gonna cover this gene because I don't wanna waste precious resources producing this protein. That, in a way, is a memory. Here's a really good example. Let's take lactose intolerance. So when you were younger, you might have been able to drink milk and have been just fine. There's this sugar in milk called lactose. Now, there's a protein called lactase, ASE. That means something that can kind of break down another thing. So this protein, lactase, can break down lactose. Now, you might have this when you're young. You can drink milk, you feel fine drinking it. It's probably because you have lactase breaking down those sugars, right? But then maybe you stop drinking milk as you get older. Your body says, well, there's no lactose floating around in my system. Why should I keep producing this lactase to break it down? So it turns off the gene that codes for lactase. But maybe you then try to eat some ice cream, 5 years later. Now you don't have the protein to break down that lactose. So then you start to get an upset stomach. That's a clear example of memory in many ways. Your body is remembering, so to speak, what has happened to you in your environment. You've stopped consuming milk. It remembers that. It's like, okay, we don't need this anymore. So it can turn off that gene. Well, just like with lactose intolerance, the same thing can happen when you train hard, when you're trying to build muscle. Your body will say, oh, we're starting to work out a lot here. We need to start producing more proteins to help build back your muscle and build it back bigger and stronger. So your body will start to uncover certain genes that it might not have been using before, so that those genes can help produce the proteins that are needed to build your muscle. Now, if you do that for a period of time, your body's gonna get pretty good at producing that protein. You're gonna have a lot of these genes uncovered. And what's really crazy, this is the memory part, when you stop training, some of these genes stay uncovered. Others get covered, and there's some of that loss in the production of your proteins. But some of these genes really do stay uncovered. So maybe a year or two later, you come back to training, those genes are still ready to go, and they're still very much able to produce that protein for you. So that's how you can start ramping up that protein production and the muscle building a lot faster the second time you get into your training. Some epigenetic changes can last years, which can be really helpful if you're wanting to get back into training. Other epigenetic changes could occur pretty swiftly, which can be useful if you're getting into training, because you can start exposing necessary genes right away within the first few training sessions. But the flip side is also true then. If you stop training consistently, then those genes are probably going to get covered up pretty quickly, which actually makes quite a lot of sense, right? If you're not training a lot, you're not going to be needing those extra proteins. Why would your body use extra resources building proteins that you no longer need or use? Interestingly though, some research has found that during your next training session, some of these epigenetic changes will occur even faster than the first time. So there's another learning element here. Your epigenome will actually start shifting faster to your demands. So those recently covered genes get exposed again, but even faster than the first time. And on top of that, you still have those other genes that stayed exposed from the first training session. So in total, you're going to be growing your muscle a lot faster than the first time because of all these genes that are staying exposed or getting exposed even faster. So in total, you not only have your epigenetics helping you produce more of these important proteins for building your muscle, but you also have the other thing that we talked about, which is adding more myonuclei to your muscles as they grow. So you have multiple things contributing to this muscle growth. This conclusion has further-reaching consequences. If your muscles are experiencing epigenetic changes, then what other changes are happening for the rest of your body? We've learned about drinking milk and how you can become lactose intolerant through epigenetic changes, but there is so much more. Epigenetics is involved in every part of your body. If you take twins and they look exactly the same when they're young, they have the exact same genetics, but as they grow up, each start to do different things. One starts to drink a lot, eat not very good healthy food, smoke a lot and not exercise. The other tends to do the opposite. They eat well, they exercise, they don't smoke, they don't drink. These two individuals are going to start looking very different. They actually start to diverge in their appearance, but also in their epigenetics. So in this sense, your epigenetics are kind of encoding memories of what you've done in the past and what you're currently doing. So if you've been working out a lot, your epigenetics will reveal that. They'll reflect that you've been working out a lot. The same thing happens if you've been smoking a lot or drinking a lot. The silver lining here is that if you've been doing things that you're maybe not so proud of or you want to improve on, your epigenetics will quickly shift to reflect whatever you're doing. So if you decide to stop smoking or drinking or start working out, your epigenetics are going to change pretty rapidly to reflect your new state, your new habit. So if you want to change your habits and build a healthier you, it's never too late to start. It's honestly amazing to see how quickly our bodies will shift to our new environments. If you change your habits, your body will change. Our bodies are extremely intelligent. Or maybe you've never tried working out and you think, well, why even start? I'm just going to lose the gains if I ever stop. Think again. Your body is going to retain these changes for much longer than you're thinking. Even after one workout session, there are going to be some slight adjustments in your epigenetics. Or maybe you're saying, I'll try next year. I can wait a little. Well, the younger you are, the easier it is to build muscle. And the next time you go to build muscle, if you've lost it, the easier it is to build it back faster. And if you're older, the sooner you start building muscle, the better. This will also stave off muscle atrophy, which begins to happen as we age. So start now, or if you already are working out, know that the work you're putting in is paying dividends in ways you maybe have never imagined. Let me know in the comments what you thought about these series of videos. Did you like all this deep sciencey stuff, or would you rather more general cool facts about your brain and body? Keep me posted on that. Cool, I'll see you in the next one.